They tell you taxes are something you pay only when you earn. A deduction on your paycheck, a line on your tax return, a bill that arrives when you make money. But what if that's not true? What if there is a tax you pay even when you have no job, no income, no business, no profits at all? A tax that quietly drains your purchasing power every single day. A tax that never shows up on a government form. A tax you cannot deduct, avoid, or appeal. And the most unsettling part? Most people don't even know it exists. Tonight we're going to talk about the hidden tax you pay even when you earn nothing. Not through speculation, not through conspiracy, but through history, incentives, and the design of modern money itself. Welcome to the Money Lens Media, where you can decode the money and history and design your future. This story matters more today than at any point in modern history, because governments are deeper in debt than ever before, because central banks are creating money at a pace once considered impossible, because wages struggle to keep up while prices quietly climb, and because for millions of people, it feels like they're working harder just to stand still. This video will uncover where this hidden tax comes from, how it was normalized, why it's politically convenient, and why it keeps repeating throughout history under different names. To understand it, we need to step back, long before income taxes, long before central banks, long before modern finance. We need to start with something far more basic: money itself. For most of human history, money was not created by governments. It emerged organically. Gold, silver, shells, salt. Different societies settled on different forms, but the principle was the same. Money was scarce, it was costly to produce, and most importantly, no ruler could create it at will. If a king wanted more gold, he had to mine it. If he wanted more silver, he had to dig it out of the ground. If he wanted to fund a war, he needed to raise taxes openly or borrow honestly. And that honesty mattered. Because when taxes were raised, people noticed. When money was debased, people revolted. Roman citizens didn't need an economics degree to understand that something was wrong when their silver coins became lighter year after year. At first, the Roman denarius was nearly pure silver. Over time, emperors clipped it, diluted it, stretched it thinner. They paid soldiers with the same coin, just less silver inside. Prices rose, trust fell, trade weakened. And yet for a while, the system kept going. Because debasement is subtle at first. This is the first pattern to remember. When rulers need resources but fear backlash, they don't always raise taxes. They change the money. Fast forward centuries later, and the same logic reappears, this time with paper. In medieval China, rulers discovered that paper claims to metal were easier to issue than metal itself. At first, the paper was backed, then partially backed, then barely backed, then not backed at all. Each time, the explanation was the same: temporary, necessary, for stability, and each time, prices rose, savings lost value, and ordinary people paid the cost, not through explicit taxation, but through reduced purchasing power. This brings us to a critical idea. A tax does not require a tax collector. A tax is simply a transfer of purchasing power. And inflation, persistent inflation, is one of the most effective transfer mechanisms ever invented. To see why, we need to talk about how modern money is created. Today, money does not come primarily from gold or production. It comes from credit. When governments spend more than they collect in taxes, they issue debt. When banks lend, they create deposits. When central banks intervene, they expand balance sheets. New money enters the system long before prices adjust. And this timing is everything. The first recipients of new money, governments, financial institutions, asset markets, get to spend it at yesterday's prices. By the time that money circulates through the economy, prices have already risen. Wages adjust last, if they adjust at all. This effect has a name in economic history: the Cantillon effect. It explains why inflation does not affect everyone equally. It explains why asset prices rise faster than wages, why housing becomes unaffordable, why savings lose value even when you do nothing wrong. And most importantly, it explains why inflation functions like a hidden tax. If you hold cash, inflation taxes your savings. If you earn a fixed income, inflation taxes your future. If you are unemployed, inflation still taxes your purchasing power. You pay simply by participating in the monetary system. And unlike income tax, you never consented. Nowhere is this clearer than in the 20th century. Before World War I, most major economies operated under some form of gold standard. Money creation was constrained, wars were expensive, and governments faced a hard choice: raise taxes and face resistance, or borrow and risk default. World War I changed everything. Governments needed unprecedented resources. Taxes alone were not enough. Borrowing had limits, so they turned to money creation. Gold convertibility was suspended. Paper currency expanded. Prices rose sharply. But here's the key. Inflation didn't require a vote. It didn't need public approval. It didn't show up as a line item on a bill. After the war, many countries tried to return to normal. But the precedent had been set. Money could be expanded in emergencies, and emergencies, it turned out, were always available. The Great Depression deepened this logic. To fight deflation and unemployment, governments abandoned gold entirely. Central banks gained new powers. Monetary policy became a tool not just for stability, but for management. Then came World War II, then the Cold War, then welfare states, then financial crises. Each time, the same solution resurfaced. Spend now. Borrow heavily. Let inflation absorb the cost. By the time the consequences were felt, the decisions were already in the past. This is why inflation is politically powerful. Raising taxes creates enemies today. Inflation creates confusion tomorrow. People argue about prices, corporations, supply chains, greed. Few connect the dots back to monetary expansion, and fewer still recognize it as taxation. But history does. In the 1970s, inflation exploded across the developed world. Savings were destroyed. Real wages stagnated. Trust in institutions collapsed. The response was not to eliminate the system, but to manage expectations. Central banks promised stability. Targets were set. Inflation was rebranded as moderate and healthy. 2% became normal. But ask yourself this: if a government announced a permanent 2% tax on all savings forever, would that be acceptable? Because that is exactly what persistent inflation is: a slow, compounding erosion of purchasing power. Invisible, relentless, guaranteed. And it affects those with the least flexibility the most. The wealthy hold assets. The middle class holds wages and savings. The poor hold cash. Inflation widens inequality without passing a single law. Now bring this story into the present. Since the global financial crisis, monetary expansion has accelerated dramatically. Central bank balance sheets have exploded. Interest rates have been suppressed. Debt has grown faster than economic output. And when the world shut down, money creation reached historic extremes. Trillions were created in months. At first, prices didn't rise. Then they did. Suddenly, food costs more, rent costs more, energy costs more. And once again, the explanations multiply. Temporary, transitory, external. But the mechanism is familiar. More money chasing the same or fewer goods. And the hidden tax resumes its work. Even if you lost your job, even if your income stayed the same, even if you earned nothing, you paid. Through higher prices, through weaker savings, through delayed stability. This is not an accident. It is a feature of a debt-based monetary system. Governments prefer inflation to default. Politicians prefer invisibility to accountability. Systems prefer survival to reform. And ordinary people are left adapting, working more hours, taking more risks, saving less, borrowing more. The system doesn't collapse, it stretches. And in that stretching, value is quietly transferred. So what is the hidden tax you pay even when you earn nothing? It is the steady erosion of money's value. It is inflation as policy, not as accident. It is the cost of maintaining a system built on promises that can only be honored by dilution. This does not mean inflation is always evil, or that money creation is never necessary. History is more complicated than slogans. But understanding the mechanism matters, because once you see inflation as taxation, you stop asking the wrong questions. You stop asking only why prices are rising. You start asking who benefits first, who absorbs the loss last, and why the system is designed this way. Money is not neutral. It reflects power, incentives, and history, and the hidden tax is one of its oldest tools. This is Money Lens Media. Subscribe for clarity, not noise. I'll see you in the next one.